We'll now hear from our keynote speaker, Lieutenant General Omar Jones. Lieutenant General Jones commands the U.S. Army Installation Management Command and is responsible for supporting the quality of life and readiness on 104 Army installations. Over the course of his career, he has deployed at every rank from second lieutenant through colonel, and with operational service in Panama, Bosnia, and Bulgaria, and combat tours in Kuwait, Iraq, and Afghanistan. He graduated from the United States Military Academy in 1992 with a bachelor's degree in operations research, which means he's very smart, and also holds an MPA from Harvard University and an MS in National Security Strategy from the National War College. Omar, the floor is yours. Let's give him a round of applause.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Appreciate y'all being here. I appreciate the opportunity to talk a little about installation management with you. General Brown, sir, thank you to the whole AUSA team, not just for hosting the event, but really for what you all do every single day for soldiers and families around the world. This is pretty exciting because most soldiers and families, they have been on one, hopefully more installations, but they've never had to think about installation management. They've never had to think about what does it take to run 104 cities around the world. Now we got a whole audience here talking about installation management today. This is like a big highlight for us. We talk about it all the time, but now you all are here, which makes it that much better for us. I've been in IMCOM 4 years now, and I'm absolutely passionate about Army installations, Army people, the Army's mission, and installation management, our contributions to Army readiness, our impact on the quality of life for Army people. And I'm excited to share that a little bit with you today. But first, a little bit of background. What Les hit what I did before I got to IMCOM, but I'll share a little bit about what I bring to the installation management space. And what I started was actually very little. But I was previously the senior commander for all the installations here in the National Capital Region. So Fort Meade up in Maryland, Joint Base Meyer-Henderson Hall here in D.C. in Northern Virginia, Fort Belvoir over in Fairfax County, and Fort Walker, what used to be Fort A.P. Hill, down in Caroline County. After doing that for 2 years, I moved to Installation Management Command, first as the deputy, and then I've been the commander for the past 3 years. So I've had the privilege of working Army installation management issues for 6 years now. And the only word, and there's only one word, and I hear it from every garrison commander that I can use to describe that experience, is rewarding. It's rewarding because of the positive impact that we make every day for the readiness of the Army. It's rewarding because of the impact that we make on the quality of life for soldiers, Army families, Army civilians, soldiers for life around the world. So today I'm hoping to share a little bit of my passion for installation management with you all, share some thoughts about the future, some opportunities and some challenges that I see out there. But before we look to the future, I think it's probably helpful to look at how did we get here? Where are we before we talk about where we might be going in the future? So who was in the Army before 2002? And I think most of the front table is going to raise their hand. Okay, so I'm going to review a little bit of history here, and you all can check me as I go through once we get to the Q&A period. But in 2002, Secretary Thomas White and Chief of Staff of the Army, Eric Shinseki, centralized installation management. They had the vision that all federal installations, Compo 1 and Compo 3, all federal installations would be under one single land-holding command. You can imagine this is pretty controversial. We were allergic to the word centralization in the United States Army. It's intrinsic to our culture to operate decentralized. Our mission command doctrine emphasizes mission orders, clear objectives, clear intent, and then get out of the way so our subordinates can exercise disciplined initiative. We encourage leaders to only make those decisions they have to make and to empower their subordinates to the point where it hurts and let them accomplish the mission within that intent. But centralizing installation management was not about centralizing command. It was about centralizing business practices so that Army senior leaders could provide those clear objectives, provide that clear intent, so the institutional Army could provide the expertise, provide the continuity, and provide the efficiency to support decentralized execution by our senior commanders. Sounds like mission command. There's a great video out there on YouTube, and I would encourage you to take a look at it from General Jack Keane, who was our Vice Chief of Staff of the Army when we centralized, and he talks about why and a bit of the controversy at the time. What General Keane says is when we centralized, before that, we had 17 different commands in the Army doing installation management, and they all did it differently. The result was you had haves and you had have-nots. We talked about that a little bit on the first panel this morning. He described that you could go from one Army installation to another and ask yourself, is this still the same Army? And then it made a very uneven experience for soldiers and families, civilians, as they would travel across the Army PCS from one installation to another. And it made it very, very hard for Army senior leaders to provide guidance for all installations across the Army, to set priorities for the entire Army. As General Keane said, quote, "We fight decentralized. We train decentralized. But we need to centralize our business practices to eliminate the have-nots," unquote. Initially, Secretary White and General Saseki created the Installation Management Agency, and about 5 years later made that one of the 18 three-star commands, Installation Management Command, IMCOM, as we know it today. And we have continued to evolve in the almost 25 years since then. For a long time, I think we have a couple out here. My predecessors were both me and Dave Wilson. So you can imagine if the two of us were one person, they'd spend 3 weeks in the Pentagon, 1 week in Texas. That only worked so well for a few years, and that job was separated and became a three-star staff officer in the Pentagon and a three-star commander down in San Antonio, commanding IMCOM. In 2019, we moved them under Army Materiel Command. That gave us a 4-star advocate with the other 4-star commanders and also with the Army senior leaders. And most importantly, from my perspective, for me and my immediate predecessors that have been part of the Army Materiel Command, allowed us to focus down on our regions, focus down on our garrisons to make sure they are providing those services, making sure they are taking care of the infrastructure, all in support of those senior commanders that are out there. But what hasn't changed, and where's Dick Formica? Dick, I think they asked you to answer your question right here, okay? What hasn't changed in the intervening 25 years is the criticality of our senior commanders. Really is the most important part of centralized installation management. Decentralized execution supported by centralized business practices. The senior commanders, the general officers that command our installations, they have day jobs. There are also division commanders and corps commanders and TRADOC Center of Excellence commanders, but they have a job directly from the Secretary of the Army, a direct delegation to command the installation. And they're responsible for everything that happens or fails to happen on their installation. The Secretary of the Army approves the Army budget. The Secretary of the Army approves the Army program. And every single dollar that the Secretary allocates to installation management, every single person the Secretary authorized to installation management works in behalf of senior commander priorities. That's how you get centralized business practices, but centralized execution. Did I answer that question? Did I preempt it? Okay, good. Thanks, Dick. Okay, thank you. So where are we today? Okay, thank you. Good. Okay. So where are we today? And I think one of the panelists said it this morning. It's probably good to start with why, or it's probably good to start with for. So what is IMCOM for? And you heard Brandon Cockrell say our motto is "We're the Army's home." That's what we're for. And when you think about what home means and the emotional context of home, we need to provide that answer that as soldiers go from one installation to another, they can say, "This is my home." Or when they move from one post to another, they can say, "The Army is my home." And just like you heard before, every installation is different. And Sergeant Major of the Army talked about that. It's different based on where it is in the world. It's based on the missions that it supports. Our job is to support those uniquenesses, but also provide a commonality of experiences. Army to community service should be Army community service. Childcare should be childcare. Range operations should be range operations. So that commonality of experience tailored locally to support the uniqueness of that installation. Who are we? It's 60,000 IMCOM professionals around the world, 5,000 soldiers, 55,000 civilians on those 104 installations. The 104 installations are distributed across 13 countries, and you can count for me here. Hopefully I'll get them all. Poland, Romania, Bulgaria, Germany, Italy, Luxembourg, Netherlands, Belgium, Republic of Korea, Japan, which includes Okinawa, Marshall Islands, where we have Kwajalein, and then all of the states across the United States to include Alaska, Hawaii, and Puerto Rico. That's a lot. And every single one of those, we have a garrison or Army support activity of a couple hundred civilians to support the senior commanders. But what do? So we have these garrisons, these formations out there on the installation. That's the place. And what do? They are manned, trained, equipped, funded to do 4 things. They deliver soldier and family programs. They manage the Army's infrastructure for both today and tomorrow. They support the readiness and deployability of all the Army formations that are on their installation. They deliver base ops services. And I'll come back to that one, because that one probably didn't make any sense for you. So I'll circle back to that in a couple minutes. If you've been to an Army installation, and everybody here probably's been to a couple of the 104, if not many of them, you have probably gone to some place where IMCOM professionals have supported you. If you've been to a physical fitness center, if you've been to a chapel, Army Community Services, childcare, retirement services office, all of the people working in those facilities are IMCOM professionals, working to support the senior commander, but also working to support all the people that live, work, train on the installation. Managing the regular Army infrastructure includes taking care of what we have today, but it also includes planning for what we need in the future to support quality of life and readiness. All the Department of Public Work professionals are part of IMCOM to make sure that that infrastructure is there and is the right quality. Being the Army's home, housing is kind of critical. Whether it's Army family housing, meaning the Army owns it, which is 10,000 of those homes, primarily overseas, a little bit here in Joint Base Meyer-Henderson Hall as well, or privatized housing, which we have 90,000 of those homes around the world here in the States, where we work closely with a company. The company owns the homes, and we deliver oversight to make sure it is done to the right quality, or barracks for our single soldiers. Our jobs to make sure housing is safe, secure, and the right quality for Army people. The third core competency is the supporting deployment and readiness of the Army. It's probably best to describe that when you think about it from a soldier's perspective. When a soldier shows up at an installation, one of the first things they do is individual training. If they go to simulation on an installation, that simulation is provided by the Directorate of Plans, Training, Mobilization, and Security for the installation, IMCOM professionals. When they go out to the range to qualify on their weapon, that range and range operations is provided by IMCOM professionals. And then we start training with their team. All of those larger ranges, the maneuver training areas, et cetera, again, provided by range operations, IMCOM professionals that are out there. And when it's time for that soldier, their platoon, their company, their battalion, their brigade to deploy, when they go to the railhead to put their equipment on a train, when they go to get at the airfield to go get on a plane, that infrastructure is also supported by IMCOM professionals that are out there. Our final core competency is both providing and integrating base ops services. And because we're the Army, we need our own language and we need our own acronyms. If you go to DC and you go find the city manager for DC and you say base ops services, they won't know what you're talking about. You say municipal services, they're going to go, oh yeah, we do that all over the District of Columbia. I know exactly what you mean. It's the same thing. Our support goes across the spectrum of municipal services, firefighters, police, custodial, landscaping, and everything in between. That includes vehicle registration and mail overseas. And then across 104, we do ID cards, retirement orders, permanent change of station orders. We even do lodging, both privatized here in the States, as well as lodging Army-owned overseas. And all those Armed Forces Recreation Centers, anyone been to Shades of Green, Edelweiss, Dragon Hill? That's us too. So if those garrisons are out there and they support those senior commanders, I often get asked, what does IMCOM headquarters do? Why are you all busy all the time? What is it that you need a headquarters in these regions out there to do? And we have 5 regions, one region for each of the Army 4-star commands, with the exception of Futures Command. And they're right there co-located with Army 4-star commands. And it's really what we do is we provide leadership and talent management, make sure that folks like Brandon Cockrell, where's Brandon? We already lose him. There's Brandon. So folks like that have decades of experience in installation management are in the right jobs to lead that team, bring that expertise, and make sure we're supporting senior commanders across the board. We provide expertise. We seek efficiencies in business practices. And we also provide continuity. Again, 55,000 civilians providing that expertise and that continuity. The science of installation management, the science of running a city is hard. I mean, without hyperbole, after 6 years, I still learn something new every single day about how this works, how we can do it better going forward, and how we keep the 104 cities running. And think about Fort Bragg, Fort Cavazos, Joint Base Lewis McChord. Those 3 alone are bigger than most cities in the United States. And again, those garrisons run those cities. So we provide that expertise to deliver those programs and services, to manage the infrastructure. We deliver that efficiency that we've talked about a couple times, just cost savings alone. So when we do acquisition at scale, so when I buy for 104 installations as opposed to 1 installation buying, we can get a lot more for the Army's buying power. We buy all the Army gym equipment, the fitness center equipment. We buy all the personal protective gear for firefighters, police officers, security guards, et cetera. And usually it's 10, 20, 30 to 1 what we can buy as opposed to what we were buying locally. We have enterprise contracts, intergovernmental partnership agreements across the region to leverage the scope and scale of 13 countries and 39 states around the country. We aggressively conduct acquisition reform at that level to make sure that every single dollar that goes into our efforts is being spent against senior commander priorities, and we're getting the most, as was mentioned earlier today, at least $1 for every dollar's worth of effort and supplies for every dollar we spend, if not even more. I think that's what General Keane was talking about back in 2002. And I think that's what General Shinseki and Secretary White wanted, centralized business practices. We also provide that continuity, both at the installation level as well as at the enterprise level. So many things we do will span the tenure of a senior commander. Most senior commanders are 2 to 3 years. Many of our projects will go the tenure of 2, 3, maybe even 4 senior commanders. There's a helipad, if you've been to the Pentagon recently, that is almost finished. I approved that project as a senior commander 6 years ago, and it's almost finished now. And we are now 1, 2, 3, almost on our 4th senior commander since that project got approved. That's not uncommon. That's just really how it takes for our infrastructure across the board. We provide continuity relationships locally. Brandon talked about his relationships with folks in Columbus, Georgia. As senior commanders rotate through, our garrison teams make sure they know the local leaders and can maintain continuity in those relationships. And at the enterprise level, we are able to do the same thing. You know, we have relationships across the world with those companies that support multiple installations, non-federal entities that support, many installations around the world. And then we are able to look across all the installations to make sure we're supporting the Army's senior leader priorities, get an enterprise perspective with continuity. Now, as I think to the future, and I think to transforming installations, it's probably good to assess. It's been 25 years since we centralized. So kind of assess where we are. Are we doing what Army senior leaders said in 2002? Have we met their intent? Is it working for the Army? So last summer, Secretary of the Army Christine Wormuth and our Chief of Staff, General Randy George, asked those questions, and they formed an Army study group. So they took Major General Jim Eisenhower. He had just come out of command of Fort Bliss in the 1st Armored Division. He's the Assistant G357 for the Army, and tasked Jim to come up with an Army study group. And Jim pulled together about a little shy of a dozen experts around the Army, uniformed civilian leaders, deep in operational experience and deep in installation management experience to answer those very questions. They interviewed all the senior commanders in the Army, both current and many former as well, to find out, is centralized installation management working? What's not working? And what more can we do to empower senior commanders, installation commanders across the Army? What came back? What Jim took back to Secretary and the Chief back in November and was codified in an Army order just this past January was an affirmation of centralized installation management, an affirmation of those decisions made in 2002 by Secretary White and General Shinseki. But what was also emphasized through that is critical to centralized installation management, critical to the Army is decentralized execution by senior commanders, those folks that command the installation. And that all of us, many of us sitting in here today that are in the installation management enterprise, we've got to be more efficient with every single thing we do to be faster to support and more efficient in the resources and how we manage those resources in support of senior commanders. So I think a couple people have already quoted today, but General Helmick's comment from Lou Holtz, I really like that quote because as I look at where we were with the study group and then I do my own assessment, having spent 6 years, I think that's very, very true. We are not where we want to be yet, but we're a lot better than we were, and I'm excited about the direction that we are going. But my assessment to kind of build on top what Jim Eisenhower and the study group is, it really goes back to partnerships, it goes back to resiliency, and it goes back to resources. And I'll talk a little bit about each of those. But resiliency first, and I think the last panel really did a great job talking about resiliency. Our installations are always going to be platforms for readiness. They're always going to be platforms where we're going to project power anywhere in the world to meet the nation's needs. So when I assess resiliency of our installations, it has always been important, but I think it's even more important today and growing more important as we look to the future. Just like Brandon talked about, it's every definition of resiliency. It's resiliency from severe weather. We've seen that just in the last hurricane season last year. Resiliency from disruption to our utilities, water, wastewater, electricity, et cetera. Resiliency from cyber disruptions that are out there. And then resiliency to adversary attacks. Those threats are higher today than they have been arguably ever, and are just continuing to grow as we go future. I would argue that installation resilience is essential to Army readiness for all the reasons we've talked about in terms of readiness and deployability on and then off of the installations. The next piece is resources. Running 104 cities is not cheap. If you could just imagine what it takes to run any city, it is not cheap to do installation management. And our installations are always going to compete for the resources with everything else that the Army does. Our job is to make sure that every dollar we have, every person that's on the team is being as efficient as possible, supporting the Army's priorities and the senior commander's priorities. Then just as Dave Wilson talked about this morning, we need to transparently and objectively communicate risk to those commanders or to the secretary, the leaders that are empowered to accept the risk, and the leaders that are able to say, this is where I want to put this precious limited resources we have, and they understand the risk that goes with those decisions going forward. That's our job. We've got to make sure that the risk is seen, the risk is communicated, and that we've done everything we can at echelon to mitigate the risk. But that risk that remains, we need to make sure the right commanders or the secretary understands the risk and is able to accept that risk as they make those resource decisions against all the Army requirements that are out there around the world. And then finally, as I look to the future, and before I talk challenges and opportunities, I want to talk about partnerships because I see the criticality of partnerships today and of partnerships growing into the future. Our installations really are ecosystems. We've talked about that in a couple different contexts this morning, but in my mind, they're ecosystems of relationships. On the installations, it's all the units that are there, it's all the other partners that are there, the DoD partners, DECA, AAFES, other folks that are on the installation, DODEA, and there's also our non-federal partners that are there, our contractors that are there, an ecosystem on the installation, but it's also an ecosystem off the installation. With our government partners, whether it's local, city, state, our federal partners across the board, industry partners, and just those community groups that are strong advocates for soldiers, families, our veterans, and the Army across the board. Many of you all, sitting behind the front three rows here, are part of those ecosystems. So just thank you. Both thank you for being here today, but also thank you for what you do in support of the Army and in support of soldiers and families all around the 104 cities that we call installations. So as I look to the future, I'm going to have about two or three opportunities, and then 2 or 3 challenges just to share with you as I think they're transforming what the Army needs our installations to be in the future. And I'm not going to spend time on data analytics, technology, machine learning, and AI. So I think we've talked a lot about those this morning, and those opportunities are rich. I am really proud of what we have done in IMCON the past 2 years, particularly leverage data analytics, visualization, really bumping up to the point where we are ready for more AI, more machine learning. The science is pretty data rich. But the things I'm going to focus on as we go forward, first is an opportunity. So as I think back to 2019, when I took command of the District of Washington, became the senior commander, the mayor, for those installations I talked about here, it is scary in retrospect how little I knew about commanding installations. But when I talk to senior commanders now, and that's what I'm going to do next week, we do a senior commander course here that is mandatory for senior commanders, and I'll spend half of next week with future senior commanders, informing and having a conversation with them about commanding installations. We've come a long way as an Army about what it takes to run an installation. What are the requirements? What's the science? What is the leadership needed to lead an installation? I think that's an opportunity for us. As we look at our professional military education for both our commissioned officers and our non-commissioned officers, to continue to educate what it means to manage an installation, what it means to lead an installation, what it means to command an installation, because that will allow us to make even better, well-informed prioritization decisions and resource decisions as we go forward. The next opportunity I see is privatization. We have learned a lot about privatized housing. In 1996, Congress passed a law that allowed us to privatize housing across the Department of Defense. The Army started doing it 2002, 2003, starting out in Fort Carson. It is not perfect. With 100,000 homes, my focus for our team, if any single family, 1 out of 100,000 feels unheard or has a house that is not safe, not as the right quality, we've got work to do. But with 100,000 homes, we really have made tremendous progress in the past 25 years. And I think the lessons learned from that, we could apply to some other areas beyond just housing. The ability to bring private equity beyond taxpayer money, commercial expertise to other Army missions but making sure we never, ever take the eye off government oversight, which is what we do in housing. What we have proved why housing works is because of government oversight, making sure that we work together in partnership, but our job is to make sure that our private partners are bringing the right safety, the right quality to homes across the world. I think there's more opportunity in that space. The third opportunity is military construction reform. And Kirk Daly did a great job of talking about this morning. Bottom line, our construction costs too much and it takes too long. And it's across the federal government, not just the Army. There are many, many reasons for this, but the effect is increasing risk on our installations and increasing risk for our senior commanders and increasing risk for the Army senior leaders. Lieutenant General Butch Graham, our Chief of Engineers, is doing a great job picking up from his predecessor, Scott Spellman, to drive that reform. And as Kirk talked about, started with General George doing a whiteboard session for about 90 minutes talking about how do we reform this process. And I think this would be a great opportunity as these reform efforts, internal to the Army, external to the Army within the Department of Defense, and then with our partners in Congress so that we can look at innovative ways to get more for our dollars, be more efficient, and be closer to industry standards in terms of cost and duration for our projects that are out there. Now, the biggest challenges I see both go back to revenue. And this is the AUSA building, and this may be one of the first times in a hot topic, someone dressed like me talked about revenue. But it matters because we are talking about centralized business practices. When it goes to housing in particular, revenue is really important. And revenue is driven by two things. It is driven by the inventory, how many houses you need, and then it's driven by the allowance, the money that comes in to pay for those houses. We determine the inventory based on a market assessment that's done every 5 years. So go to Zillow, Redfin, take your choice of other websites. They're usually updated, daily, if not more frequently. But we base our inventory assessments, what needs we have in the local community, what needs we have on the installation by 5-year updates. Our basic allowance for housing is updated once a year. Just think about how much rent fluctuates, usually between tenants. Tenant comes in, tenant comes out, rent's going to fluctuate for a house, a rental property, apartment, whatever it happens to be. I think we have an opportunity now with technology, an opportunity with our OSD partners to really relook at those systems to make sure that we really understand in real time and at the right flexibility and the right updates what we need on the installation, and that the allowance is going for housing for soldiers and families living off post, or that goes to the housing partners to provide the right quality home on post, is updated at the right frequency and is the right amount as we go forward. The other one I think about a lot is historic facilities and historic homes. Sometimes historic just means old. When you look at a building, a home that's 50 years, 100 years, 150 plus years. I was visiting classmates up at West Point this weekend, and we stayed in a classmate's home that's 200 years old. That's an old home. It takes a lot of money to maintain facilities that are that old. The amount of money to maintain those, the operations and maintenance costs, far exceeds the revenue coming in. So I really think we as an Army will need to take a look as we go forward, because those costs aren't going down. How do we preserve our culture going forward? How do we preserve our traditions, preserve the buildings that are still historically significant, but make sure that we're still investing in terms of the infrastructure we need today and the infrastructure we need for tomorrow. So thank you. And that's really where I'm going to close today, is just a sincere thank you to each and every one of you. Thank you for what you do for soldiers. Thank you for what you do for Army families, Soldiers for Life, our Army civilians around the world. Thank you for support to all the IMCOM professionals that you interact with on our 104 cities around the world. Installation management is absolutely about Army readiness. What we do each and every day is about supporting senior commanders. And by supporting them, we are supporting the quality of life of Army people and the readiness of the United States Army. This has been the most rewarding job I have had in uniform. It's been an absolute pleasure to be one of the IMCOM professionals supporting the entire U.S. Army. Thank you very much. So, Dick, I think you got the first question, unless I already answered it. Okay, fair enough. Okay.
Sir, what change in laws and policies would help you the most at IMCOM, and why?
I think I would start off with, back to my comments about MilCon reform. And that's, yesterday I was meeting with a number of congressional staffers back in San Antonio before I came to DC, was up on the Hill about 2 weeks ago. And what I just shared with challenges are the same things I communicate in those forums. So I think the opportunity to reform the MILCON process, reduce costs, decrease the amount of time it takes to build. I think the opportunity to look at what it takes for us to maintain historic facilities, historic homes that are out there, preserving culture and traditions, but making sure we're getting the most for our dollars that are out there, then looking at more dynamic systems that really get to how many houses do we need, and then what are the housing allowances going to be. I think those are the biggest things. I think internal to the executive branch, I think we need to take a hard look at what is called scoring by the Office of Management and Budget, because that really ties into what opportunities we have for privatization and longer leases going forward. I'm not sure, I'm not going to stand here and tell you what I know the answer is, but I think that needs to be a conversation as we think to the future, as we think about transforming our installations. What should the role of scoring and where should there be exceptions to scoring as we go forward? What else? Yeah, please go ahead.
Yes, sir. Thank you for your comments.
Hmm?
You mentioned intergovernmental agreements. How do you see IGSAs playing a growing role in addressing some of the most pressing issues facing Army installations?
I'm a big fan. So we have 168 IGSAs, intergovernmental support agreements, that are active right now. Another 12 that are in the pipeline. I'll bring us up to 180. And it is everything from, we do dog catchers in one installation with the local community, to research partnerships we do regionally with multiple colleges and universities, and everything in between. One of the ones I am most excited about right now is the IGSA we have between Fort Sill and the local school district there. And what it's allowing us to do is small construction projects below the $4 million threshold, but the construction company that supports the school district is coming on the installation and conducting small construction projects there. I know there is conversation with many of the oversight committees about, could we expand that? And there's conversation actively among congressional staffers and members right now about going from 10 years to 20 years, maybe, which would be great. Going from beyond just OMA to AWCOF, NAF, some of the working capital funds that are out there, and then potentially expand it to other construction opportunities, potentially restoration, modernization, renovation of facilities, and maybe even to the military construction space. So there's been a lot of positive feedback in terms of what it does for us, and the cost savings is significant. But to the earlier comment that was asked about islanding, what I find with IGSAs, so not only are we more efficient, not only does it help us deliver better services, it strengthens the relationships. Because now you have people that probably never would have come on an Army installation. They're coming on and they're seeing how soldiers live, work, train, what it means to be an Army community. That's good for us as America's Army to be able to connect back to the American people. So there's value across the board in those relationships. All right. Thanks, Jack. Yeah.